Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome. The doctor is in, and I apparently forgot to turn on my noise canceling for my headset. Give me a second. Ah, that's much better. Okay. Yeah. So, last Wednesday, we got a mysterious letter from someone claiming to be Beatrice. And Ed Fan, thank you for lurking. Appreciate you being here. Hope your day is going well. Right, so... There we are. Hey, Kishu, thank you for joining. Give me a second, let me get you that shout out. Well, yeah, the text will be available on the replay, so. 1 second. Oh, how was security breach, by the way? And Edfan says, doing okay. My arm feels like it's been run over by a car or something heavy. Ouch. Hope you feel better quickly. All right, give me a second. I had a lot of hydrating prior to starting, but now my mouth feels dry again. Thank you for the host, Kishu. Appreciate it. And thank you for the honk, Wild Talon. Appreciate you being here as well. Hope your day is going well. All right. I'm sure you're all dying to know what happens next after what happened last week. So, let us continue. The strange letter that the witch had entrusted to Maria wiped all memories of the dinner from our minds. Maria was repeatedly barraged with questions by Aunt Rosa and the other parents. They became increasingly ill-tempered when they refused to believe her. If we kids tried to butt in, they'd probably ignore us. Our parents were all stirred up, firing back and forth about the gold and the distribution of the assets, and completely forgetting that we were even there. I had already guessed they'd been talking like this in the shadows, but I hadn't thought they'd be so blunt. It gave all of us kids a considerable shock. From what we could overhear, all the parents wanted more money as soon as possible. Back and forth about grandfather's inheritance, back and forth about the distribution of the gold if it was found, about advance payments and cash. So despicable. I could hardly bear to watch, even though one of them was my father. Looked like Jessica felt the same way. We left our seats without being asked to and went to hang out somewhere well away from our parents. I get it. Now I totally see why grandfather hates coming down for meals. So disillusioned with her parents right now. All that about money and the inheritance. How can they act like that right out in the open? Well, I'm already completely disillusioned with my old bastard. There's no way I could think any worse of him. Hey, Mickey, thank you for lurking. Hope your day is going well. That's exactly the same for me. Still, that freaking shocked me. Shocked me to the core. Jessica looked down at the floor, irritated. She was always talking about how bad her parents were, but maybe she hadn't really felt that way deep inside. The depths of Jessica's shock made that clear. You're all minors being supported by your parents, so you might not understand. But getting money is neither a simple nor a pretty thing. I won't try to force you to understand right now since you're still kids. But even so, I want you to realize that your parents are just doing their best in their own way. Oh, great. George Aniki's gotten all mature. George Anii-san, I know you're working hard as a full-fledged member of society, but does that mean you turn into a shameless, greedy vulture like our parents whenever you start talking about money and assets? If it were only for my own benefit, then no, I wouldn't want to do that. However, when your family and your employees, your subordinates and their families are all counting on you, there are some times when you must fight. I hate that kind of fight. That back and forth about grandfather's inheritance just makes me want to puke. Jessica pretended to spit violently. That harsh reaction made the depths of her pain very clear. Let's stop talking about this. All this about grandfather's hidden gold, property, and inheritance is our parents' problem, not ours. I agree. At the very least, I think children have a duty to be considerate and stay out of their parents' way when they're talking together. Sounds pretty boring. Everyone knows the phrase adults are filthy, but we had now seen that for ourselves, and that really did give us a considerable shock. Is that an actual phrase? Well, maybe it was a phrase during the 80s, or maybe it's a Japanese phrase that I'm not familiar with. I don't know. George Aniki was now pretty much an adult, and I'd already been disillusioned with my dad, so the shock wasn't that big for us. But Jessica seemed to be taking it hard. Apparently, she'd received a bigger blow than I thought. She always talks badly about her parents, but it looks like she hadn't changed at all on the inside. Even now, she's still a pure-hearted, delicate person who can't doubt others. I'm sure she respected her parents as much as anyone else does. And then her parents started raging about, going, "Money, money, inheritance, my money!" right in front of all the other parents and the children. It's no surprise she received such a shock from hearing that. Jessica-chan, please don't start hating your mother and father. I won't ask you to understand them, but at least don't hate them. I get it, just leave me alone for a bit. 6 years ago, I would have kept taunting Jessica even after she got all dejected. But I guess I really have grown over the last 6 years. I realized it'd be better to leave Jessica alone right now. Jessica suddenly looked away sulkily, and I left the parlor. She probably wanted to be alone for a while. I could do nothing but wordlessly watch her back as she left. Come to think of it, I wonder where Maria-chan went. She's probably pouting in front of the portrait. Maria truly looked up to witches, and she'd expected that coming in direct contact with Beatrice and receiving the letter as proof it would surprise everyone and make them happy. However, the adults had doubted its authenticity, thoroughly bombarding Maria with questions and refusing to accept her story. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, and I'm getting caught up on chat. Wildtown says, doing well, how about you? I'm using my phone to make a couple of tassels, so apologies in advance for any random typing. No worries. And yeah, hopefully the app won't cut on you from now on, Edfan. Even for me, it wasn't hard to imagine how much that must have hurt Maria. We couldn't speak to Maria or Jessica. In the end, George Aniki and I just abandoned ourselves to the sound of the falling rain in the dark night. I wonder what's happening with that typhoon. Maybe there's something about it on the news. George Aniki started walking over to the corner of the parlor where the television was. He hadn't called me over, and I really couldn't have cared less where the typhoon was on the sea now. So, without going over to the television, I loitered around the window. The wind hasn't picked up that much here, but I wonder if it's horrible over the sea. I did hear about a severe storm warning on the weather report. Ah, Kirie-san. I take it those big talks between the adults are going smoothly, yeah? She seemed to catch the sarcasm. Kirie-san shrugged. I wonder if that stomach ache of a discussion will continue all night. It's not going to be fun. Well then, please enjoy playing vultures to grandfather's property as much as you'd like. I feel sick. I'll agree with you on that. If I could just slip away like you, I'd do it. Unfortunately, I can't. Even if I'm not allowed to speak. We spouses have it pretty rough too. Kirie-san took a deep breath, smiling bitterly. That's right. I probably wouldn't let Kirie-san speak since she only married into the family. Still, as Dad's partner, she's had no choice but to stay by his side and support him. She's probably had to bear the full brunt of this mental pressure much more than me. I wasn't going to apologize, but realizing that I'd spoken too harshly, I cut the sarcasm for the time being. So, how does it look? Are they still on the topic of the mysterious witch, Beatrice? More or less. Those four siblings are always piling up secret agreements when they come together to discuss the division of grandfather's inheritance. They're saying that some unknown fifth person has appeared and is trying to make things even more complicated, and there's no way that'll make for a peaceful conversation. Just when you think they're snarling at each other, they'll set up a common front. Natsuhine-san's not the only one getting headaches. On the one hand, they all want a larger portion than the other siblings, so they're all rivals. On the other hand, they don't want 1 yen to be snatched up by anyone other than the siblings, so they're also all allies. I hadn't been told the details, but the siblings were apparently discussing how to protect their shares under various situations. Setting up ceasefire agreements and rules to prevent anyone from getting an unfair advantage, even preparing to resort to legal action if absolutely necessary. That they would go this far to preserve their shares was so beyond disgusting that you just had to acknowledge their resilience. Oh, how is it I'm dropping frames? That doesn't seem right. Because I'm playing a PC game? Well, it's a visual novel, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So, basically, Beatrice is like an assassin sent by grandfather. He probably wanted to scare the hell out of his children for talking about the inheritance without him. Who is this Beatrice, I wonder? If everything she claims is true, then she's a mystery figure that no one knew about until today, and she also knows about grandfather's hidden gold. On top of that, she was even entrusted with the head's ring. She must truly have been trusted by him. Well, obviously, I don't think she's a witch riding around on a broom, but there's no doubt she's a mysterious person who's earned the right to be called a witch. If only Maria-chan would go into more detail about that. Everyone's been smothering her, even though she's just a little girl. They've really scared her, and some things they might have asked now can't be asked. Some things they might have asked now can't be asked. I wonder if those people have ever read The North Wind and the Sun. That won't be important at all. What we do know is that Maria received a letter from a person who took the name Beatrice. She sure is shy for a mystery person, entrusting Maria with the letter and hiding away even now, and she could have just appeared and talked to us directly. Hey, Battler-kun, do you really think a person called Beatrice actually exists? Who knows? Doesn't it really seem like a false name? I mean, like she's grandfather's representative, so she was given permission to take the name of the witch from his delusions? No, that's not what I meant. Right now, there's a total of 18 people on Rokinjima. Do you think there's a 19th person? Are there really a full 18 people on this island right now? Wondering about that, I began counting on my fingers, and it really did come out to that many. Which is surprising, because I wasn't aware I had 18 fingers. Do you think a 19th person exists? What do you mean? Do I think that a 19th person exists? What exactly do you mean? Just what I said. The person who lent Maria that umbrella supposedly wasn't one of us 18. So isn't it natural to assume that a 19th person exists, and this person lent Maria the umbrella? Well, yeah, it sure looks that way. Then where exactly is this person now? At the very least, she must have been on the island when it started raining. And ever since that time, the weather has grown progressively worse, so taking a boat out would be pretty much impossible. In that case, that person must still be on the island hiding from the rain somewhere, and without any of us spotting her. True. We've all been randomly prowling around all over the mansion and the guest house, but no one has bumped into a 19th person. But this island is huge. There might be other places to take shelter from the rain other than the mansion and the guest house. At about this time, I began to realize what direction Kyrie-san's suspicions were taking us in. Kyrie-san was denying that a 19th person existed. Beatrice was one of us 18. In other words, she thought someone we knew well was tricking us. If Beatrice is who she claims, she would surely be the most honored of guests. The most honored of confidants, trusted by Grandfather. There's no way Grandfather wouldn't give that kind of person a warm reception. She would surely have been ushered into the mansion. However, we haven't seen anyone like that. Wait a sec, isn't this line of reasoning a bit too hasty? I mean, sure, no one spotted this person, but that doesn't mean you can deny the possibility that a 19th person exists, right? Maybe for some reason they landed on the island stealthily and have been hiding ever since. That's what they call a devil's proof. It's easy to prove that something exists. If this Beatrice appears in front of us all and says hi, then it's settled. It's impossible to prove that there's no 19th person. Yes, Battler-kun, your way of reasoning isn't bad. In our current situation, there isn't enough information to either accept or deny that a 19th person exists. But if you spin the chessboard around and think that way, we can deny the existence of a 19th person with near certainty. Spin the chessboard around was one of Kyrie-san's favorite phrases. I've been influenced by those words and use them myself from time to time. When you get stuck trying to find a move in chess or shogi, then by spinning the board around and looking at everything from your opponent's standpoint, you can often see a strategy that'll give you the upper hand. It means turning things around and putting yourself in your opponent's shoes. You see, let's say that a 19th person called Beatrice actually exists. That person must have managed, without being seen by anyone, to stealthily arrive on this island and remain hidden ever since. Maybe they had some reason, okay? In that case, why did they go to all the trouble of appearing before Maria and handing her the letter? It really was a contradiction. If they had some reason for hiding themselves, then they should have stayed hidden the whole time. But even so, they had appeared openly in front of Maria. Then, wait, Maria said it herself. She said the witch made her a messenger. Maybe that's because Maria was the youngest and looked the most obedient? Why would they need a messenger? If they just wanted a letter delivered to the family conference, they could have mailed it. If they mailed it to each of the 4 siblings, no one would be able to ignore it. There was no need for this person to carry it themselves and secretly deliver it by hand. That really does sound pretty weird. In the first place, if Beatrice existed and wanted to make her presence known to everyone, then she could have just openly presented herself to all of us. Despite that, she chose the vague method of appearing through a little girl called Maria-chan, and only gave us a vague impression of who she was. Contradiction. Let's go a little deeper, shall we? She appeared in front of Maria, trying to give us the impression that a 19th person existed, and yet, she still hasn't appeared before us and is hiding somewhere at this very moment. Think about those contradictions. You've got to keep these things in mind when you spin the chessboard around. In short, if a person wants to leave us with the impression that Beatrice exists as the 19th person, what might their goal be? If this person wanted to hide, then they wouldn't have made their presence known. And if they wanted to show themselves, they wouldn't have used the roundabout approach of entrusting someone with a letter. Which means... it's simple. Beatrice is one of the 18 people. That's why they want to create the illusion that there are more than 18 people. The 19th person was revealed so spectacularly. If someone were to profit from this, it wouldn't be some 19th person in hiding. It'd be one of the original 18 people. Of course, this reasoning is full of holes. If you turn over even a few of its premises, it'll simply fall apart. But I'm almost completely certain it's correct. This is starting to feel pretty creepy. Someone lent Maria the umbrella and handed her the letter. Supposedly, none of the 18 did this. And yet Beatrice was hidden among those 18. What was this person planning, hiding their true form and pretending to be Beatrice? I suspected it might have been Maria-chan play acting, but the contents of the message were extremely complicated, and it's hard to imagine Maria-chan writing that herself. However, I can't deny the possibility that Maria-chan is working together with someone. Wait a sec. Maria's a 9-year-old kid, right? What could she possibly be planning, and with whom? And what about her straightforward, overly honest, obedient nature? Yes, I also understand what kind of a person Maria-chan is. But that's exactly why I think it's possible. That girl's a dreamer who can't help but look up to and blindly accept the existence of witches. So if a person appeared in front of her and claimed to be the witch Beatrice, Maria-chan would happily swallow it up, I think. So, you're saying if someone disguised themselves by wearing that fancy dress from the portrait, tricking Maria wouldn't be that hard? Of course, with that reasoning, all of us women would become the primary suspects. Anyway, who did Maria-chan encounter? Learning the details of that question would be the best key to solving this riddle. This key has been firmly locked away inside Maria-chan's heart. Everyone denied the existence of the witch without listening to her, barraging her too much with questions about who Beatrice actually was. She probably won't open her heart to the adults now. In the dim hall, in front of the portrait of Beatrice, Maria was sobbing. Ooh, ooh. No one believes I met Beatrice. Ooh, ooh. Even though I showed them the letter Beatrice gave, they still don't believe. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, that's a dangerous thing to do when you're trying to read this thing. Last thing I need is the hiccups. Anyway, Maria-chan's holding the key. The key to whether Beatrice is one of the 18th people or a 19th person. Maria's stubborn, right? When that girl gets angry, it's pretty hard to make her feel better. Battler-kun, I think a kid like you would be better at cheering her up than an adult like me. After she's feeling better, try asking. I know you don't care about all this back and forth about the inheritance, but don't you find this Western Mansion mystery situation exciting? Who in the world is this person who gave Maria-chan the letter? It makes your intellectual curiosity ache. You're actually pretty tough, considering you're still excited after being dragged through that endless money talk. Adults can be pretty amazing. I shrugged exasperatedly, but I did notice something. Kirie noticed how dejected I was after overhearing our parents' turbulent discussion, and was probably trying to clear the air. At the very least, I'd recovered enough to voice my complaints. She wasn't my real mother, so I never felt like calling her mom. But it did make me think she's a real adult. Hey, brats, so this is where you were. Kirie, you really took your time fixing your makeup, didn't you? Think I'll make a habit of going out to touch up my makeup, too. I'm sorry, a woman's makeup takes us a long time. So, how has the discussion been without me? I'm sure everything was all peaceful and harmonious. Kirie-san poked the weak spot under my arm with her elbow. We decided to take a break to cool our heads a little. It looks like we'll be at it all night. Makes me want to cry. His way of talking hadn't changed, but he couldn't completely hide his fatigue. I couldn't say I was sympathetic, but he looked pitiful compared to his normal, energetic self. Still, that rain's just awful. I really don't want to go back to the guest house. It looks like Natsuhine-san set things up so we could spend the night here in the mansion. What'll we do? We don't need to decide until you're done, right? If you run so low on energy that you can't return to our room, then we can take them up on their offer. You're right. We can think about it later. What about you, Battler? If I stayed, I'd just get in the way. I'll be nice and go back over there. I see. Will you go back soon? I don't know. Be lonely to head back by myself. I'll gather all the kids and we'll head out. Okay. You go do that. Also, Battler, you won't be going to sleep that easily tonight, right? Yeah, I'll probably be up talking with the cousins. Sounds like we'll be up all night. Is there a problem with that? I see. If you're still awake when the adults' discussion is over, I want to have a little talk as a family. What? That doesn't sound like you. Apparently, Kirie-san was thinking the same thing. What are you talking about? She asked him in a small voice. Looked like Kirie-san didn't have a clue what Dad meant either. I also want to talk to you about it, Kirie. I'll tell you later, so don't ask now. Please. I don't know anyone who neglects the concept of family as much as this old bastard. And now he's saying we're gonna have a talk as a family? Both Kirie-san and I couldn't help but get wide-eyed. Don't look so terrified. I'm the one who should be terrified. After all. At that point, he swallowed his words for an instant. Even though putting on airs of importance wasn't much like my dad. You're freaking me out, Dad. Everyone in our family's gathered here now, right? Don't make a big deal about it and just spit it out. I will probably be killed. There was a huge crash of thunder. It must have been really close. Dad's expression, brightly illuminated by the lightning, was burned into my eyes. Dad's face, which always looked so sure of itself and which always wore a taunting expression, was strangely frail in a way I couldn't really explain. He was so worn out that he looked like a different person. What? What are you talking about? That doesn't sound like you. I agree. What happened? You look so timid all of a sudden. It's not like you. I'm gonna go fix my makeup too. Don't follow me. Dad turned away, weakly. After that, only Kirie and I were left, still wide-eyed. What did he say? Tonight he'll be killed? You don't think that mysterious letter scared him, do you? He's been watching too many serial murder movies. Kirie didn't answer my light-hearted words and continued to stare at my dad's disappearing back. Battler-kun, when you told Rudolph-san to spill the beans right away, he left without telling us anything. Even though he said he had something to say to both of us, he didn't answer you. Why? Spin the chessboard around. What do you see? Well, he said he wanted to talk, but then couldn't. That's a contradiction. What, can you see something by looking from Dad's perspective? Yes, I can see something. He wants to talk about something. However, he doesn't have the courage to bring it up. So he actually means chase after me, talk to me, and ask me about it yourself. By saying don't follow me, he actually means the opposite. He actually means follow me and force me to answer. Seriously, what a spoiled brat. What? Can you really call that reasoning? That's ridiculous. Can great private and police detectives deduce the emotions and feelings between men and women? They can't, right? Figuring out the feelings of the opposite sex is an even more advanced art than exposing the tricks in difficult crime cases. If you ask me, romance novels have much deeper mysteries than masterpiece mystery novels. I see. Is that how it is? I'll stand alongside that spoiled brat. He normally loves to bluff, but tonight he's completely tired out from the heated discussion. He probably wants someone to lean on at the moment, and responding to that need is the role of his partner. Ah, sounds passionate. Then I'll leave that old bastard in your hands. Yes, leave it to me. I called out to Kirie-san's departing back. Huh? What? I wanted to say thanks. Thanks to you, my gloomy moods cleared up a lot. That's good. Communication's important. After answering with a wink, Kirie-san followed after Dad. Natsuhi could be found in a dimly lit hallway. Now and then, the thunder would crash, but this had no effect on Natsuhi's expression. She looked completely worn out. The discussion that had just taken place between the relatives in the dining hall was repeating itself inside Natsuhi's mind. Beatrice had proclaimed that in addition to the gold, all the inheritance and the property of the Ushiromiya family would be given to the person who could solve the riddle. In other words, she planned to undermine the absolute guarantee that Kraus, as the oldest brother, had to succeed the family head. Originally, the other siblings had absolutely no chance to inherit the headship. To them, this proposal by Beatrice was extremely desirable. It was obvious that they would accept it. There was no need to play some clumsy detective game. Natsuhi knew that this so-called 19th person, Beatrice, couldn't exist. Naturally, Beatrice was nothing more than a fictional character used to pass a message that Kinzo had written himself. As proof, Kinzo remained stubbornly neutral as to that letter's authenticity. He was completely ignoring these reckless claims that he shouldn't be able to ignore, that he had given up the head's ring. In short, Kinzo had wordlessly admitted that the letter held his own message. Most likely, one of the servants had given Maria the letter. Kinzo had probably worked out an elaborate plan where the dress from the portrait would be prepared, and someone, probably Shannon, would be made to wear it and deliver the letter and the umbrella. By doing that, he could make it seem like the witch from the portrait actually existed. No, if anything, that alone was proof that Kinzo was behind all of this. In that case, it was the same as Kinzo trying to butt in on the siblings' private discussion. Then Kinzo, by announcing that he'd give everything to the person who solved the riddle, could weaken Kraus's overwhelming advantage. Now it was certain. Kinzo had eavesdropped in the siblings' discussion in the parlor earlier that day. So he had known how Kraus had staved off the attack by the other three. And to make the scales of the battle go back into balance, he had sent out this strange letter which benefited Kraus's rivals. He was trying to push this crazy theory so that Rosa, who had a weak position among the siblings because of her age, would join with Ava and Rudolph. Then, with a 3-to-1 advantage, they'd be able to overwhelm Kraus yet again, and make their ridiculous theories get accepted by force. And by doing that, he gave them the power to resettle what had once been a nearly decided conflict. They had now started repeatedly pressing Kraus to pay them a large amount of money, using the condition that all the siblings would guarantee Kraus's position as the successor. Talk about advance payments was being brought up again despite having been rejected once. Of course, even without the story about the hidden gold, the Ushiromiya family's store of wealth was vast. That store of wealth alone was more than enough. Even if the hidden gold was buried forever along with Kinzo's death, there would be more than enough to satisfy. Therefore, even if they weren't that interested in the gold itself, Kinzo had managed to instill the lifelong fear that on the off chance that someone found the gold, that person would be granted the headship. And this kind of Achilles heel would definitely be taken advantage of by someone sooner or later. The only person with this fatal weakness was the successor, Kraus. The other siblings had found. No, they had been told by Kinzo about something that only Kraus could lose, and they had thoroughly taken advantage of that. Natsuhi, as Kraus's only ally in his painful position, and as his wife, wanted to fight alongside him. She kept trying to explain to him that the existence of the gold itself was a farce, and that there was no need for him to compromise. Kraus had always told Natsuhi. He had told all of the siblings. He always said that the hidden gold was nothing more than an illusion created by Kinzo. Therefore, Natsuhi had believed it as his wife and had supported her husband on that foundation. Even so, Natsuhi's words didn't reach Kraus. Even though Natsuhi had fought so hard and had lent all of her strength, he continued to fight by himself and was trying to compromise with the other three siblings. Natsuhi sadly and weakly wondered why she could not be of use to him, then started getting angry. It had happened when everyone decided to take a short break to cool their heads. Natsuhi had flared up against Kraus. Enraged, she had asked why she could not be useful to him. He had then told her that he wanted to talk about something and invited her into a room that she was normally not allowed to enter. That room had been sealed with a heavy-looking padlock, and just looking at it had given her an uncomfortable feeling.
There's no need for you to worry about anything said by those three, or even this suspicious person who calls herself Beatrice. After all, the gold is just a ruse created by Father. There's no way something like that could be found. Your position as the successor is a solid fact. What are you afraid of?
Kraus removed the padlock on the door. He then motioned for Natsuhi to enter. Enter.
What is this?
There's something I want you to see. I've never shown you this before.
Natsuhi timidly opened the door with a dubious expression on her face. It was pitch black. She searched for a switch to turn on the lights, but since this was her first time in the room, she didn't know where it was. Kraus entered behind her, pushing her in, and when he closed the door before turning on the lights, the two were swallowed up by the darkness. Only the sound of Kraus locking the door rang out through the dark.
What are you doing? The lights.
I'm turning them on now. Wait.
Just as he said, when Kraus pushed a switch on the wall, a flickering light turned on and lit up the room.
That is...
Natsuhi had her breath taken away. The room had no windows, and at a glance it appeared to be empty. In the middle of the room, a small round table had been set, and the lights brightened only that table as if it were the leading part in the play. On top of the table, a red tablecloth of elaborate design had been set out, covered with dust, and on top of that, something about the size of a grown man's arm had been set down. That something took Natsuhi's breath away.
It's a gold ingot of incredible purity. Without this, no one would have believed in the legend of the gold.
It was an ingot of solid gold. Even in the faint light, it sparkled with a noble and dignified glint.
This is not a proper ingot. I don't even know whether it was cast inside or outside the country.
It took a high level of skill to make the purest of solid gold ingots, and in order to verify that purity, it was standard to have the original foundry and the name of the bank that guaranteed it imprinted on the gold. However, this ingot did not have that kind of seal. This mysterious gold bar had come from an unknown foundry.
Look here. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a bar of gold.
Natsuhi, following Krause's words, timidly approached the ingot.
Right there.
Krause pointed at the surface of the ingot. Natsuhi concentrated on that section. Right there was the thin imprint of the one-winged eagle crest. Natsuhi's breath was taken away once again.
That's right. This is the legendary ingot that Father said he received from the witch, that the president of Maruso had witnessed and was allowed to select at random to take back with him. That gained the trust of the fixers in the business world. I had to use all possible means to find it. I found it before the other siblings could.
How could... Then... The legend of Father's gold is...
It actually exists. The gold that Ushiromiya Kinzo received from Beatrice actually exists.
Impossible! So it really does exist.
Natsuhi was shocked. Krause had always said that Kinzo's gold was just a fabrication, so she had believed it as his wife. However, the reality was different. Since he had held definite proof, he had been more certain than any of the other siblings that the legend of the gold was true. Because of this, Krause was deeply frightened at the possibility that someone other than himself would find the gold he'd failed to find, costing him everything. But to Natsuhi, this truth was more than enough to split open her heart. She had thought that, as Krause's wife, she should be his closest confidant, which was why she had selflessly supported him. And yet, he had hid this fact from her until today. Why?
Have I been so undeserving of your trust?
I didn't mean it like that. It was only that there was no need to mention it.
Is that all a wife means to you?
Calm down. Becoming passionate easily is one of your bad habits.
You're the one who's making me like that, aren't you? I've been supporting you as a wife ever since I married into this family. For your sake, I threw away the family I was born into, and I've been offering up my heart and my body to serve you. And in return, this is what I get? How could you?
Krause grimaced, looking annoyed. His expression effectively communicated how much he disliked this part of Natsuhi, even if he didn't say it out loud.
It doesn't look like I'll be of any use to you anymore.
That's fine. I can resolve the troubles with the siblings by myself. I don't need your help.
That's wrong! This is the Ushiromiya family's problem. It's true that I'm not permitted to wear the family crest on my body, but I'm still your wife. Even so, are you saying I'm not capable of helping you? Are you?
I especially wouldn't want to risk getting you involved. It would probably make your headaches even worse than they are now. Take a rest for today. The siblings will deal with the siblings' problems. It has nothing to do with you. That is all.
A dull headache tormented Natsuhi. No matter what medicine she took, no matter what scents she burned, it wouldn't heal. In fact, simply wandering alone through the dark corridors and listening to the sound of the rain seemed to be a better cure.
I may be Natsuhi, but I was never Ushiromiya Natsuhi. I have been despised and treated as a borrowed womb, and insulted when I couldn't even fill that role. Even so, I've tried to properly perform my duties as a wife, but now, even my husband has rejected me. I've done my best raising my daughter as if it were the last job left to me. However, I've had no release from my anger and sadness, and they've caused me to subconsciously strain that relationship too. As I've been excessively strict in Jessica's education, she dislikes me thoroughly. She despises me for having no interest in anything but grades. There's no longer anything I can do for the Ushiromiya family. No, it's no good. Despite it all, I must help my husband and beat back the schemes of the other greedy siblings. The family head won't be around much longer. Eventually, Kraus will succeed the head, and the next successor will be Jessica. Strictly speaking, the man who enters the family by marrying Jessica will become the next head, but it all comes to the same thing. I have to make Jessica an excellent successor whom everyone will accept as worthy to take over the Ushiromiya family. In the days to come, that greedy Ushiromiya Eva will probably be plotting to find some fault with the main family. And if all goes as she plans, Jessica will be dragged down from the succession with George set up in her place. It is regrettable, but George is a man, and even more, has matured as a person. Compared to Jessica, who is right in the middle of her rebellious period and whose grades are slightly below average, it can be seen at a glance who is more fit to succeed the head. So in order to secure Jessica's position, I need to turn her into an excellent person. After doing that, I want to find her an excellent husband worthy of the excellent person she will have become. A wonderful man who will truly accept Jessica and stay with her through all life's joys and sorrows.
Was Natsuhi trying to entrust her daughter with fulfilling some desire of her own? Natsuhi thought back to the days when she had no choice but to marry into the Ushiromiya family because of that unavoidable fate. She had tried to block that from her memory. She had consciously forgotten it and had actively attended to the life she'd been given as Ushiromiya Natsuhi. And in so doing, she had built up a new life. But just now, it felt like all of that had been casually rejected.
How should I think as I live my life? I do not know.
Natsuhi helplessly rested her head against the glass of the window. The glass, which was cool thanks to the raindrops beating against it, felt somehow refreshing, even though it should have been emotionless. Right then, it seemed to be the only thing that could understand Natsuhi. At that point, even if someone had appeared, Natsuhi didn't intend to pay any attention to them. But she did pay attention, because it was her beloved daughter.
Oh, it's you, Mom. What the heck are you doing in a place like this? I thought you were a ghost.
Just like always, her words were rough and not at all like a girl's. Instinctively, words of rebuke rose to Natsuhi's throat. However, their strength gave out and they didn't escape her lips.
Forgive me, but my headache is awful. Please leave me be. I see.
Jessica was seeing her mother in a position of feebleness for the first time, so she was considerably disconcerted. Until just now, she'd been filled with contempt for all of the parents, including her mother. But now those feelings had been completely swept away. Her mother's utterly exhausted face had wiped them all out. In its place, the words George had told her floated back up in her mind.
Our parents are doing their best in their own way. And because their families are counting on them, they can't afford to keep everything pleasant and have a heavy responsibility to fight.
Maybe her mother had been standing around in this dimly lit hallway because no one had tried to understand that in her. Jessica hated her mother, so she had no intention of speaking kindly to Natsuhi just because she was looking a bit frail. So when she attempted to speak kindly to her mother anyway, she had to clench her fists and gather up the words from deep in her heart.
It sounds like you've really got your hands full with that meeting thing. It has nothing to do with you. Please go somewhere else. Is your headache bad? Should I go get some medicine? You don't have to trouble yourself. Please, leave me alone.
Natsuhi wasn't being cold. She just wanted her daughter to go far away so that she wouldn't have to bump against Natsuhi's own short temper. But there was no chance that Jessica would realize this.
Okay.
Jessica hung her head, looking sad. Seeing that expression, Natsuhi recognized the kindness that Jessica was trying to muster. She gave her head a small shake to drive away her own unkind feelings.
Then I'll leave. I'll be with the other cousins so I don't get in the way of the adults. See you later. Wait there.
She called Jessica, who was trying to leave and looked lonely, to a stop.
What? Thank you for being so considerate. It isn't good of me to go to sleep and leave you alone. Don't talk like that. You'll bring bad luck. I've made you worried, but I'm okay now. I will go. If I let my daughter see me this feeble any longer, I'll only make her feel more uneasy.
With that thought in mind, Natsuhi left Jessica with words of gratitude and made to depart. This time, Jessica had called out to her mother's back. Natsuhi stopped and turned around, asking what business Jessica had with her. But Jessica herself didn't know why she'd stopped her mother. And for a while, she smiled wryly, muttering to herself as she hesitated over what to say. She was poking around in her pocket when her hand touched something, and she took it out.
Hey, Mom. I was given a charm today. What was it? A charm against magic? I'm pretty sure that you were supposed to hang it from your doorknob, I think. I forget. There's no point in me having it, so I'll let you take it.
It was the scorpion charm that Maria had given her on the beach. Although she'd heard of its various effect from Maria, Jessica's mind had gone blank, and she was just barely able to say even that much. Jessica, thinking that her mother probably wouldn't accept it anyway, immediately drew back the hand she had stuck out, grasping the charm. So when Natsuhi came back to take it, she was extremely shocked.
What is this? Some kind of prize toy? Well, I think it's something like that. I guess you wouldn't really expect a charm that looks like a toy to do anything.
But her mother took the charm from where she grasped it in her hand.
Thank you. I'll take good care of it. Sometime soon, in exchange, why don't I give you a charm that was important to me when I was a child? It's not like that's why I gave it to you, Baka.
Sorry, this is kind of a tsundere moment.
But, well, if you really say so, then I will rest for now. My headache is awful. Try not to stay up too late. Sure.
Natsuhi put the charm in her pocket and turned away. She then disappeared into the dark hall.
It seems the weather will be like this all day tomorrow after all. Dang, this makes the good weather we had earlier feel like a lie. George, Aniki, and I were killing time in front of the parlor television. At that point, Jessica returned. Her face was still blank, but it looked like she'd calmed down a little since we'd last seen her. Is Maria still in front of the portrait? Nope. She just came back and she's sleeping over there on the sofa. It's getting pretty late for her, after all. Looking at the clock, I saw it was a little past 10 p.m. Even if we were planning to stay up all night, it was about time to head back to our room. Well, my mom did have a room prepared for us in the mansion. What'll we do? I'd rather head back to the guest house. Going by what we saw of our parents, I think it'd be better if we weren't in the mansion. I agree. Feels like they're telling us kids to mind our own business and stay out of their way. Let's be good little boys and girls and do that. As we were talking about this, Aunt Rosa came into the parlor. She was looking all over restlessly, probably trying to find Maria. Aunt Rosa, if you're looking for Maria, she's over there on the sofa. Thank you. My, she's out cold. We must move her to a bed. If you'd like, I'll carry her over to a bed. Thanks, that would be wonderful. Are you all heading back to the guest house? Or are you going to stay in the room Natsuhine-san had prepared here? We were just talking about that. We just decided to head over to the guest house. I see. Then could I ask you to take Maria with you? I'd feel much more reassured if she stays with all of you cousins.
Behind those words, Sorry. Used to the other narrator. Forgot battlers in the room. Behind those words, she seemed to be concealing some regret that the adults, herself included, had deeply hurt Maria's feelings. Leave it to us, Aunt Rosa. After all, we do have an expert at comforting Maria with us. Are you talking about me? I couldn't do it myself. We'll need everyone together. That's right. Battler, weren't you the one who hit it off with Maria when you were messing around earlier? As we said this, Aunt Rosa smiled, looking truly happy. Thank you, everyone. It looks like our meeting will last until very late. So, while I'm sorry to burden you like this, I'll be counting on you all to take care of Maria. Hey, Maria, you sound asleep? We're gonna go back to the guest house. Maria muttered something indistinct, rolled over, and fell back asleep. It looked like she was sleeping deeply. She's really out cold. I'd hate to wake her. Right, I'll carry her. Maria's body was much lighter than it looked. I lifted her up and put her on George Aniki's back. It was raining hard outside, and Aniki couldn't hold an umbrella and carry Maria at the same time. It looked like Aunt Rosa would come with us as far as the guest house to help out. However, when she heard Uncle Krause's voice call out to her, she had no choice but to return. Now that's a problem. I have to go back now. Is everyone returning to the guest house? After we left the hall on the way to the entrance, the door to the servant room opened and Shannon-chan stepped out. It has grown very dark, so allow me to guide you. That would be great, Shannon-chan. George-kun is going to carry Maria there. Could you hold an umbrella for him? Yes, certainly. Shannon-chan brought umbrellas for each of us and a flashlight to guide the way. As we opened the front door, the downpour was quite terrific. It looked like we wouldn't have any spare time to take a pleasant walk and enjoy the nighttime rose garden. Aniki, is she too heavy? Want me to carry her? It's okay. I can at least carry Maria-chan. I'm truly grateful. Please take care of Maria. Sure, you got it. Then I guess this is a good night, Aunt Rosa. Then I'll see them over there and return here. Yes, please. Aunt Rosa watched us leave. Maria, I'm sorry for everything. Rosa's mumbling voice didn't reach the person in question, or any of the... Oh. Rosa's mumbling voice didn't reach the person in question, or any of the kids, but disappeared beneath the sound of the rain. After cutting through the rainy rose garden, we arrived at the guest house. If only I applied for the position of Maria Carrier. That would have gotten a chance to have Shannon-chan's huge boobs rubbing all over my arm. That's not why I did it. It's a misunderstanding. I thought that if I didn't walk like this, George-sama would get all wet. Come on, quit babbling and go in. After being urged on by Jessica, we folded up our umbrellas and went into the guest house. Has anyone gotten their clothes wet? I can bring some towels if you want. Yeah, you don't need to worry about us that much. Thanks, Shannon-chan. Ah, that's right. We were planning to play cards or something. Would you care to join us for a bit? Huh? Who had the night shift on today's schedule? I believe we had a special schedule during the family conference. Also, I think a few alterations have been made, so I'll go and check. Wait, if you have to go all the way back to the mansion to find out, don't force yourself. Oh, that's all right. I can find out from the servant room in the guest house. Please excuse me for a short while. Shannon-chan gave a quick bow and went into the guest house servant room. The rest of us headed for the cousin's room and decided to put Maria to bed for the time being. Maria was sleeping very deeply, and there was absolutely no sign of her eyes opening. For now, we'd get some soft drinks out of the room's refrigerator and drink those while playing cards or something.
Canon-kun? And you're here too, Genji-sama. What has happened with tonight's shift? Kraus-sama has given an order. He made some sizable changes to the shift schedule.
Indeed. Goda-san now has the night shift at the mansion. Shannon and Cannon have the night shift in the guest house. Kumasawa-san and I have been ordered to sleep in the guest house. Just now a phone call came saying that once you arrived, you were also to remain here for the rest of the night.
Huh? That certainly is a sizable change. The shifts at the guest house and the mansion have been completely reversed, haven't they?
Originally, Shannon and Cannon had been assigned the night shift in the mansion, while the night shift in the guest house, where all the relatives were staying, had been assigned to Goda, who had an abundance of experience in entertaining. Kumasawa should have been sleeping at the guest house, while Genji should have been sleeping in the mansion. However, it seems that Kraus had suddenly ordered that the schedule be modified. The shifts at the guest house and the mansion had all been reversed, and Genji was spending the night in the guest house.
It's probably because of Beatrice-sama's letter. Why probably? After such a mysterious letter disappeared, it was only natural that Kraus-sama would suspect one of us. We served directly under the master, so Kraus-sama tried as best as he could to keep us far away from the family conference.
Genji, Shannon, and Cannon were all permitted to wear the Ushiromiya family crest, the one-winged eagle, as the servants who served directly under Kinzo. Of course, since they were working for the Ushiromiya family, they had to obey anyone's orders, but their only boss was Kinzo. Since only Kinzo held the right to employ them, even Kraus could not have dismissed them of his own accord. Because of this, Kraus and the others often viewed these servants as Kinzo's underlings and shunned them. And in fact, Kinzo seldom let anyone other than them enter his study. This sudden shift change was probably a clear expression of the sense of mistrust that it caused. Considering the time Kinzo had left to live, this would definitely be the last family conference before the problem of the inheritance came up. On top of that, the mysterious letter that claimed to be from Beatrice had dropped in out of the blue. Kraus definitely wanted to keep Kinzo's loyal subjects away from the table of such a delicate and important discussion.
If you would excuse me, I will go rest. If anything happens, call me immediately. Our company tonight is special.
Yes, certainly, Genji-sama.
Genji nodded back, went behind a screen, took off his jacket, and slowly began to relax after a day's worth of tension.
The ones who returned just now, were they the children? Yes. The other relatives are having a conference in the mansion. It looked like it would drag on for quite some time. Then we've got it easy. It's already this late and there's this weather. The rest of the relatives will probably spend the night in their rooms in the mansion. Yes, probably. I'm only saying this because Genji-sama isn't around, but I'm a little happy I was sent to the guest house, I guess. Oh? Why is that? Because you can stay away from Madame and Ava-sama, those bullies? Or do you have another reason? It's not as though I have another reason. I see. Then let's do our best together with our night shift. I'm counting on you, Ne-san. Just now, I was asked to go to the children's room and play with them.
Shannon hung her head apologetically, gazing at Cannon uncertainly. Cannon didn't try to meet her eyes and spoke curtly as he sighed. It looked like he didn't plan on indulging his quote-unquote sister.
You can't. You were assigned to the night shift. Besides which, it isn't necessary for furniture like us to respond to an invitation to play. You understand, right? Yes, I do understand.
Shannon's shoulders drooped slightly. She had already expected that Cannon, a stickler for rules, would say something like that, but she still seemed a little discouraged. In case you can't see the chat right now, Ed Fan, check your DMs. Wild Talon's got something she wants to say to you. As Cannon flipped through a logbook, he spoke without facing Shannon.
That means the children will be waiting for you. You'll have to apologize and tell them that you have the night shift and won't be able to stay with them. Go and come back. Ah, yes. I'll go apologize and come back.
Shannon hurriedly stood from her seat before her brother's mood could change and flew out of the servant room after giving a quick bow. As he watched her go, Cannon took a single deep breath. Genji's voice came from beyond the screen. Cannon, I'll be here so you can go too.
Genji-sama. Shannon was the only one called. It's not as though I was invited.
That is only because you were not there at the time. If you had been, you would have been invited as well. It is good to play as a child from time to time.
No, such a thing is not necessary for me. Human children may have a need to play, but we are furniture.
Is that so?
Mei-san is also furniture. Even if she pretends to be a person, it'll only hurt her later. I understand that, so I try not to get too close to people. That's all.
Genji did not say anything after that. After a while, he stood up and used a pot of hot water to make powdered cocoa, serving some to Cannon as well.
Is that for real? I had no clue. Dumbass, you're too loud. You'll wake Maria up.
Battler was so surprised that he yelled obnoxiously and scattered his cards everywhere. His voice caused Maria to turn over once, but she soon fell back into a deep sleep. Jessica gave him a jab and he lowered his voice.
Still, seriously. And now that you mention it, they really did have that kind of atmosphere, didn't they? So now I see. So George Aniki is...
George couldn't be seen anywhere in the room. A short while ago, when Shannon came into the room, George suddenly said that he'd forgotten something in the mansion and needed to go back and get it. Shannon said she would guide him, just like she had on the way to the guest house, and the two of them departed together.
Well, there's actually been signs of it for a while now. You know, questions about hobbies and favorite things. I always thought it was a bit much for a passing interest, and look what's happened now. Come to think of it, I get the feeling George Aniki's always been overly nice to Shannon-chan. Now I get it. According to the weather report, it looks like it'll be at its worst tonight. It also seems like it'll last all day tomorrow, though it should get a little better. Really? Then maybe the boat won't arrive until the day after tomorrow. I hope that doesn't interfere with your work on Monday. I already knew the typhoon would be coming beforehand. Just in case, I made sure I didn't have any plans for Monday, so it's okay. I may not look it, but I really am the type who can plan ahead in his schedule. George puffed out his chest, acting proud. Compared to the calm appearance George always had as the oldest cousin, he now amusingly looked like a little kid. Shannon chuckled at this abrupt contrast. It's no surprise you're so well prepared, as someone who'll bring prosperity to his company someday. Well, making a company prosper really is a tough job. Money isn't the only thing that's important. I learned that well when studying under my father. Making a company prosper is like owning a castle and leading your subordinates. My dad really loves reading about great leaders during the warring periods of Japan, a hobby that's probably influenced by the fact that he shares Toyotomi Hideyoshi's name. Much of his philosophy on managing businesses comes from talking about them. Did you know? Takede Shingen, who was feared as the leader of the strongest cavalry corps in the warring period, started out with his troops in complete disarray and didn't have the kind of strong leadership necessary to utilize them well. Is that true? That's a little unexpected. In order to unite his troops, Shingen showed his excellent leadership in many ways. For example, when a soldier succeeded well in battle, he would immediately honor them with a medal. Normally, that kind of thing was put off until after the war, and they were all awarded at once.
He continued this diligently while on the field of battle, and immediately showing his appreciation for his troops' military exploits motivated them in an extremely significant fashion. Also, whenever one of his troops was brought down by an illness, he would be the first one to rush up and care for them, and so on. Takeda Shingen wasn't just the man who led the strongest cavalry corps in the warring period. He was the person who cared the most for his troops throughout the warring period. And because he was that kind of person, all of his troops went along with him. The truth was, Shannon had already heard this story several years ago. But whenever a discussion of his father led to this sort of topic, George would always glow and look like he was having a great time. So Shannon just smiled without interrupting, urging him to continue. Of course, in a capitalist world, money determines both your strength and the height of your fortifications. But you can't build up a castle or succeed in war by yourself. Such things can only be accomplished with the support of many subordinates by borrowing their strength. After understanding this, when I look at my father's back, I realize how immature I am. I can clearly see how much competition he had to overcome before building up all he has now. George-sama, you truly look up to your father. I'm jealous. Sorry, that's not how I meant it. I'm sorry, that's not how I meant it either. The two of them looked awkwardly at their feet. Shannon had no parents. She had been brought up in an orphanage owned by Kinzo called the Fukuin, or Gospel House. Fukuin House. So the Gospel House Orphanage. Under the guidance of Kinzo, their honorary director, the orphanage offered members who excelled a chance for an on-the-job serving experience. If their efforts met with Kinzo's approval, they'd be able to leave the orphanage and work as servants for the Ushiromiya family. This was considered to be the highest honor for those who lived in the orphanage. Servants from the Fukuin house all took names with the character owned in them while they served. So Shannon wasn't her real name. The same went for Kanon. All of the members of the Fukuin house were orphans. At least, they were all people who had been separated from their parents under special circumstances. Because of this, the orphans had been taught to think of each other as their only family. That's why it seemed so natural to both of them when Kanon called Shannon his sister. And while both Shannon and Kanon were working in the mansion today, there were several other servants possessing the own character in their names, such as Manon and Lennon, who often worked in a rotation schedule. However, there were not many servants who stayed with the Ushiromiya family for long. It was standard for them to quit after 3 years. So you could probably say that Shannon, who'd been working for 10 years, was a notable exception to the rule. Working as a servant for the Ushiromiya family was a heavy burden to bear, but the pay wasn't bad at all. Working for a full 3 years would earn more than what was needed to enter mainstream society. That was why, even though the orphans realized what a harsh task working for the Ushiromiya family was, they still hoped to be accepted. Maybe the fact that Shannon managed to continue working for 10 years wasn't because she had more willpower than the other servants. Maybe she'd gotten stuck working for 10 years because she didn't have the courage to say she wanted to quit. Kinzo couldn't even trust his own blood relatives, and those excellent servants sent from the Fukuin house were the only ones he could rely on. Because of that, Kinzo would sometimes allow them to wear the family crest as servants under his direct control, and have them work close to him. You've been working here for almost 10 years now, right? Yeah, you must have saved up a lot of money by now. I wonder. It's not like there's anything in particular I'd like to buy. After all, a few million yen isn't enough to live off of for the rest of your life. So the reason you've been working all this time wasn't to hit some target sum? Yes, that's right. I have nowhere to go outside this mansion. And I've been getting along well with Milady and the other young servants. The madam does scold me sometimes, but caring for the roses and cleaning the mansion is fun. But that can't be your entire life, Shannon-chan. No, Sayo-chan. Shannon cast her eyes downwards when she heard her real name. She understood what George was trying to say and fell silent. There's something I've learned as I continue to study even after becoming an adult and a full-fledged member of society. A human's life is not as monotonous or short as we thought when we were kids. All school-aged kids have certain fears they can't shake. They wonder whether they'll live the rest of their lives like sleepy classes after a monotonous and boring school day, spending their time in a carefree laziness without anything interesting happening until it's all over. However, life's only like that for underage students. Compared to a human's life, the time they spend as students is nothing more than the blink of an eye, a period where they break through the shells of their immaturity. The inside of the shell might be a hot, suffocating, and boring world, but the world beyond that shell is vast and filled with limitless possibilities. So far, your life has been trapped inside the shell called Shannon. I think you're under the mistaken impression that your life will continue like this forever. That's... Shannon couldn't deny those words. She'd been unable to harbor any clear doubts about her lifestyle, and since she'd never had any hopes or goals for changing herself, she'd lazily continued living the way she always had. And if asked whether this life was satisfying, she wouldn't have been able to nod. She may have been intentionally averting her eyes from the truth. Without George's admonishments, she would have continued pretending not to notice as her real life slipped away, bit by bit, neglected. Yep, this part.
George-sama, is it wrong for me to continue living this way?
Yeah, it is. Oh, and by the way, didn't you break one of our rules just now? George immediately gave a strict answer, then broke out into a mischievous smile. Shannon already knew what she was being chided for, and she hung her head again, apparently embarrassed. Didn't you promise not to use Sama when the two of us are alone?
I couldn't obey that as a promise, but if it was an order, I would have to obey it, because I'm furniture.
Then it's an order.
Yes, certainly, George-san.
As Shannon hung her head, her face red, she said George's name again, this time using San.
Yes, that's fine, Sayo-chan.
George smiled at Shannon, no, Sayo, to praise her small act of bravery. This short exchange alone made it clear how far back their relationship must have stretched. For a long while, the two talked as if the weather raging about them didn't even enter their thoughts. They talked about the many memories they'd built during their relationship that no one else knew about. Every once in a while, a flash of lightning would attempt to interrupt them, but this could sully neither the roses nor the time they spent blushing at each other.
That's right.
I have something I wanted to show you.
What could it be?
George, who had been speaking eloquently, suddenly started to stutter. Now that's something you can't say 5 times fast. Watching him, Shannon seemed to guess something. George timidly searched through his pocket. Something got caught in the depths of his pocket, and just like the stuttering George, Hey, Reeve. Welcome. How's it going? And just like the stuttering George, it took a little while to get it out. It was a very small box. A small box covered in a deep blue velvet. Give me 1 second here. Giving a shout out to Reeve. They were last seen playing no game? No. Oh, I misspelled it. That's why. Let me fix that. Last seen playing Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. That's what I thought. Okay. It was a very small box covered in a deep blue velvet that was bigger on the inside. No, I'm kidding. That peculiar shape was enough to tell anyone what was resting inside. Shannon had prepared her heart somewhat, certain beforehand that this was what he'd been planning. But even so, when she actually saw it, she couldn't avoid blushing once more. George opened the small box, took something out, and held it out for Shannon to take.
I want you to take this. I couldn't accept something so valuable. You can't take it. That's not... I'm unworthy of such a thing. Sayo, this isn't a request. It's an order. Take this ring, okay? If it's an order, I cannot disobey. Yeah, that's right. Well done.
Shannon, not wanting to show her bright red face, timidly accepted the ring from George's hand while still staring at the ground. That ring wasn't a simple accessory. Yes, it is a great image for the background here. It was a noble object, meant since ancient times to be offered to a special woman under special circumstances. Therefore, while George could order her to take it, he could not order anything beyond that. Anything beyond that would depend not on an order, but on Sayo's own will. So from here on, I'm not ordering you anymore. Sayo, I want you to give me your answer by tomorrow without using words. Do you understand?
How should I...
I won't order you any further, so this isn't an order. But a ring is something you put on your finger after all. If you like it, you can just put it on any finger you choose. Shannon had only pretended not to know. She already understood what he wanted her to do. But she was standing at a huge crossroads of her life.
Look how late it's gotten. Let's call it a day.
George turned away from Shannon, acting just a bit bluntly.
I could probably order you to wear it on your left hand. You might be timid and dependent enough to actually obey that kind of an order. But I want at least this last step to be done by your own will, Sayo.
Okay, I'm not aware of who Moralsix is. I'm hoping that it was just an accident and they didn't realize about no links in the chat, but we don't bite much, so if you want to chat, feel free. Just no links, please.
Understand? Yes. So that's my order. I want you to think about it well tonight and show me your answer tomorrow.
Shannon nodded back. Today was the culmination of their many days spent together. This moment certainly hadn't come as a surprise to Shannon.
We should be getting back to the guest house soon. If we take any longer, we'll make everyone worry about us. I'm sorry. I just remembered something I had to do in the mansion, so, I have to go back to the mansion.
Something this late? Really? George stared into Shannon's face as he laughed mischievously. He definitely saw through Shannon's lie. However, when he saw how she felt, he could understand that she might be so embarrassed that she'd want to be alone. So because George realized the meaning behind Shannon's lie, he accepted it. Okay, chapter break, which means it is time for a brief stretching break for me and an ad break for the rest of you. So I'm going to pause this here, and I'll be right back. And we're back. And thank you, EdFan. I got your message. I did just a little bit of hydration before starting back up, so.
Shannon entered the entrance hall to the mansion with a tottering gait. A mixture of exaltation and uncertainty gave her a feeling that she couldn't easily describe. It swelled up in her chest until it felt like she was about to burst. After stopping for a second in front of the servant room to take a deep breath and calm her heart, she opened the door. Inside, Goda, who had been ordered to take the midnight shift at the mansion tonight, was absorbed in a worn-out crossword puzzle magazine. He looked up for an instant to see if one of the family had come, but when he realized it was a fellow servant, he returned to his puzzle as if nothing had happened.
Genji-sama told me to come and help you.
Ah, is that so? That's a relief. All right. Have a good night, Wild Talon. Just be sure that you catch up on the VOD before next week, because this is where things start picking up. On that note, I'm posting a disclaimer in the chat.
I was just about to go check that the mansion was fully locked up, but I felt uneasy about leaving this room unmanned. After all, Kraus-sama and the others' meeting looks as though it will continue for quite some time. They might request some tea at any moment.
That's true. And what should we do? Should I watch over...
In that case, forgive me, Shannon-san, but I ask that you patrol the mansion. I will stay here awaiting the family's orders.
Yes.
Shannon was slightly disgusted. Even though she'd come here to help out as a favor, she was casually being forced to do the job of the person actually on duty. Furthermore, after one-sidedly forcing that task on her, Goda returned to his magazine once again and became immersed in his crossword puzzle. Shannon bowed her head as a token sign of respect for her elder, then left the room to patrol the mansion. Thanks to her being a bit ticked off, she managed to suppress that floaty feeling she had been having until just now. And anyway, she couldn't let Genji or Kanon see her looking like this. She wanted a little time to herself until her heart calmed down, so maybe going on patrol wouldn't be so bad. She began to hear the tumultuous voices of the family discussion coming from the dining hall. Someone was speaking at a great length, only to be interrupted by someone else. The second person also began to speak in a very long, drawn-out fashion, until yet another person interrupted. That kept on repeating. It was as though their displeasure was seeping out through their voices. She had been told to go to the guest house, so it would be bad if Kraus discovered her. Thinking this, Shannon dashed past the dining hall. Then she went along a prearranged route through the dark mansion, checking that all the locks were secure. She walked down the hall, checking each window. There were no humans on Rokenjima other than those connected to the family, so locking up didn't really serve much of a purpose. No one had been in the habit of locking up the Ushiromi head family, at least not until Natsuhi had scolded them for being careless. I mean, that's true. Like, how many visitors are you going to get to the island? And even then, how many of them are going to find the mansion? The metal fixtures on the windows were ice cold, and as she checked them one by one, the glow in her heart seemed to cool down. At that time, she thought she saw something twinkling across the hall. Twinkling? How could anything be twinkling through the darkness of the hall? She figured she must have been imagining it, but she still held her breath. Grasping a curtain, she fearfully gazed down the hall. However, other than the occasional crack of thunder brightening the hallway,
she was unable to glimpse any flicker again. It must have been her imagination after all. Maybe her heart was so agitated that she'd seen something that didn't even exist. Shannon went back to checking the windows. However, a certain unnerving memory was resurrected in the back of her mind. It was that ghost story which had been passed down amongst the servants who served the Ushiromiya head family. The mansion had two different masters, one of the day and one of the night. Beatrice, the master of the night, would sometimes fly around the mansion in the form of sparkling butterflies. That was the story. Come to think of it, didn't Canon-kun once say he'd seen it with his own eyes? Though he got sulky when I said it, he must have imagined it and refused to believe him. Could it possibly be true? The roar of the thunder gave no answer. Ah, you have two canines watching with you, huh? Are they enjoying this? The second day, October 5th, 1986. Genji tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. They want more treats, huh? Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night. But the thick rain clouds didn't seem like they'd be letting any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing. Excuse me. Your birthday 3 years before you were born. I don't know how to feel about that. And I'm not sure you will either.
It seems like we'll last all day after all.
Sorry for keeping you waiting, Genji-sama.
Cannon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. On their normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to an early morning shift. They were on a special schedule for the 2 days of the family conference. However, unless the typhoon passed today, the relative stay on this island would last until tomorrow.
Cannon thought it best to be prepared for the special schedule to last an extra day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain on the previous night. Even though they'd spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guest, one stormy night was enough to ruin it. Cannon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he'd probably already woken up and was probably already preparing a breakfast as exquisite and elegant as glasswork. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Give me a moment, I need to adjust my seat. Genji took a bundle of several keys from his pocket and unlocked the front door. The Ushiromiya family mansion was the only thing on Rokonjima, and so in the past they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsuhi had ordered that the mansion be locked up from midnight to early morning. Ever since then, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servants' morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Cannon so that Goda could start preparing breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep.
Well then, let us begin the morning chores.
Yes, sir.
The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains stayed closed, the mansion would remain enveloped in faint darkness, as though it was still trapped in the previous night. Following a well-rehearsed procedure, Cannon went around the mansion, opening the curtains for one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, drawing the curtains made it feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't smelled anything yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's prized cooking.
Good morning. He tried to greet Goda, who should have been getting breakfast ready, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen was darkly lit, and not only were the curtains not open, but the fan wasn't even running. It was still cold, without any trace of a fire being lit, so of course there were no signs of breakfast being made either. Though it would have been inexcusable, perhaps Goda had overslept. Even servants are only human. They sometimes sleep in and show up late. In the rare case that such a thing happens, it's part of a servant's code to hide the unsightly scene before anyone notices, smoothly cover it up, and make sure the family never even realizes that anything has gone wrong. Cannon took the receiver of the phone that had been fitted to the wall and dialed the number for the extension line in the servants' sleeping room. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Cannon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could the lightning last night have damaged the machine, breaking the extension line?
Touch that dial now, we're just getting started.
Thank you, Edfan, for redeeming that. Could the lightning last night have damaged some machine, breaking the extension line? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Cannon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. He gave up trying to wake Goda with the phone and dashed over to the servants' sleeping room. Had to figure out who was speaking here. How long has it been since I stopped sleeping and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? That vague sense of awakening was part of Natsuhi's usual morning experience. She always slept lightly, and she couldn't sleep at all without medicine. To Natsuhi, sleep was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought that it was still the previous night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. No one would torment her as long as she remained inside this room. And her headache wouldn't get any worse here. This room was the only place she could find peace. So when she left, it meant returning to the world where her husband's siblings kept trying to stab each other in the back. In that case, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? That ridiculous notion brought a bitter smile to Natsuhi's face. She was starting to sound like Kinzo. Though she often complained about Kinzo staying locked up in his own room and refusing to attend to everyone else, the truth was that she longed to do the same. Natsuhi gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. It was Maria's charm, which Natsuhi had received from Jessica. Didn't Jessica say something about it having the power to repel magic, telling her to hang it from her doorknob? Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from the malice of her husband's siblings. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful.
I wonder if I have Jessica to thank for the little bit of peaceful sleep I managed to receive.
Then Natsuhi remembered. That's right.
Last night I promised Jessica that I'd give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I?
Natsuhi opened a drawer on her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured when she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Natsuhi had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round mirror about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it seemed much more authentic than the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keychain. She had heard that this was a spiritual mirror for warding off evil spirits, and she had been given it specially by her grandmother when her grandfather's mementos had been disturbed. Distributed. Sorry. It had been believed since long ago that a strange power resided in this mirror. Perhaps people thought it could reflect calamity and malice in the same way it reflected light. Natsuhi returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed throughout the room.
Yes?
Good morning, madam. It is Genji. My apologies for waking you so early.
I'm coming now. What is it?
No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they come to wake her in person. Perhaps something bad had happened. Maybe some fatal oversight had been made while preparing breakfast, something that would shame the household in front of their guests. Natsuhi took a deep breath in anticipation for whatever trouble she was about to hear of. When she opened the door, Genji once again gave a morning greeting while bowing deeply. Natsuhi tentatively responded.
Good morning. Did something happen?
My apologies. It would seem that the telephones had broken down due to the lightning last night. The extension telephone isn't working, so please forgive my coming to see you directly.
The extension telephone isn't working. That will be troublesome. Will it be possible to fix it?
I'm afraid we don't know the location of the damage. Later on, I would like to call in an expert and have him repair it.
Does that mean we'll be unable to have it repaired until after the typhoon passes? Then it will remain broken down for the duration of our guest's stay. Will that hamper our efforts to care for our guests?
We will do all we can to ensure there are no problems.
Very well. I'm counting on you to make sure we have no blunders.
Natsuhi let out a small sigh of relief. She had been prepared for the worst, but damage to the telephones wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. Then again, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Ava. Natsuhi gave her head a light shake.
Are the preparations for breakfast proceeding well?
As to that, we haven't been able to find Gota. The arrangements for breakfast have yet to be carried out.
What did you say?
Natsuhi was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phones not working. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time and then come to something like this when the relatives were visiting? Natsuhi put her hand to her forehead and shook her head.
Well, I suppose he slept in. At any rate, just see to it that someone hurries up and prepares breakfast. I don't care who. What?
Natsuhi exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The creepy thing she saw there silenced her completely. It was an unpleasant sight, as though someone had dipped their fingers in a reddish-black liquid and scratched at the door around the doorknob. It was probably some sort of awful prank, arranged by some person who wanted to make it look as though they tried to force the door with bloody hands.
What sort of prank is this? How awful!
I also just noticed it as I came to call you. I will clean it later.
Perhaps this is a vulgar joke by one of the guests. Disgusting, truly disgusting.
Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsuhi had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she had pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. In fact, it would surely be better to act as though she hadn't even realized such a prank had been played on her. Natsuhi gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with a squeak of her heels. When Natsuhi and Genji arrived in the parlor, Ava and Hideyoshi were already there.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Natsuhi-san. Heard Goda-san would be making us breakfast, too. My stomach's been getting all excited since I woke up.
After all, it seems food is all you can look forward to at the head family household. I'm pleased to see that you two are in high spirits so early in the morning, Ava-san.
With a weary expression, Natsuhi returned Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive despite the early hour. Then Cannon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a small voice.
Cannon, have you still not found Goda? My apologies, madam. I went all over the inside of the mansion and the guest house, but I still haven't found him. Where in the world has he gone? At any rate, breakfast is a higher priority than finding Goda right now. See to it immediately. Yes.
Cannon glanced at Genji. It seemed that he had something else to report, but was uncertain whether or not the word should come from him. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself.
Madam, it is not only Goda. Your husband is also nowhere to be found.
My husband?
Yes. Even before visiting you, I went to his room to tell him that breakfast wasn't being prepared, but I did not find him there. Furthermore, he is not the only one missing. Rudolph-sama, his wife, and Rosa-sama are nowhere to be found.
Not in the guest house? Nor the mansion? Yes. They were not in their rooms in the guest house either.
When she'd heard that Goda alone was missing, she'd assumed he had slept in or was loafing around somewhere. However, now that she'd learned that several of the relatives were also nowhere to be seen, she began to take a slightly more optimistic view. Could last night's family conference have continued all night up until the present moment? If so, they might have wanted to cool their heads after being shut in a stuffy room, going out for walks on their own through the rain. The part about cooling their heads really sounded like something Kraus would say. Goda had probably been summoned to accompany them and aid them in some way. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to understand that preparations for breakfast would be hindered if he did not return. However, maybe the family conference had continued until this very moment, with an atmosphere that would make it hard for anyone to slip out. Yes, that theory would be quite convincing for Natsuhi. She remembered the illusion that she'd felt that morning, as though the previous night had never ended. When she'd learned that Sorry. When she learned that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep, weary breath. After all, that banquet of filthy vultures circling Kinzo's property was still going on.
Perhaps they are still discussing the inheritance somewhere in the garden, or maybe the beach. At any rate, if we don't call Goda back, we'll never be able to begin preparations for breakfast.
Because, he's apparently the only one who knows how to cook there.
So what are you saying? Are Nisa and the rest still continuing their discussion?
She had planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Natsuhi and managed to grasp the situation.
Nissan and Rudolph sure are tough. Maybe it's just youth in Rosa's case? Just a bit after midnight, the two of us were so tired that we headed back to bed. Though I do remember that Nissan and the rest were still having a heated discussion at that point. Men certainly are unpleasant when they get all fired up.
Natsuhi snorted, her face still blank.
Canon, search outside. If you find Godo, tell him to return immediately and begin preparing breakfast.
Certainly.
Natsuhine-san, we don't know for sure that they're outside, do we? Couldn't they also be inside Father's study?
I see. That's certainly possible. I don't know what path their conversation took, but there's certainly a chance they moved to Father's study and let him in on the discussion.
I can't imagine that Father would willingly let them bring such a detestable topic into his study. You really think so? Well then, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, Genji-san and Canon-kun, but could you search outside? It wouldn't be that strange for Nissan to suggest they go outside for a walk to cool their heads. Even in this weather. I'll go to Father's study. Who knows, they might actually be there after all. Eva-san, I couldn't ask a guest like you to exert herself so. I will go. I can also wish him a good morning while I'm at it. Oh, then I'll leave it in your hands. Though I somehow doubt he'll return your greeting. Natsuhine-san, have you always been on such good terms with Father? I don't know whether you could call it that, but I'm sure that I have gained his trust as the wife of the successor to the Ushiromiya family. Then I'm sure he'll at least answer you, right? I'd like to at least have breakfast with Father. Do you think you could convince him to come down and join us? It seems that he thoroughly despises the rest of us, but I'm sure he'll listen to you if he trusts you that much. After speaking so boldly, if you're unable to convince Father and come down alone, then I doubt you'll ever be able to claim that you've earned his trust again. I am not confident, but I will try.
Natsuhi responded, looking discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Eva was clearly mocking her, confident that Natsuhi wouldn't be able to get Kinzo to come down. But even so, Natsuhi would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible and letting Eva go instead. Ava's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand made Natsuhi clench her fists slightly. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder.
Madam, please take this if you would.
And this is?
Genji handed Natsuhi a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kinzo's study. The study had an auto-lock and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. Yeah, family politics. This is... they're a mess. This family's in particular. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door.
But if this key is used, won't you also receive the blame?
When the master is sleeping deeply, simply knocking on the door will not suffice. It would be more difficult to persuade the master to leave his room if you must talk through the door. Please, use this.
Genji.
Until now, Natsuhi had thought of Genji as a cold servant who wouldn't do anything for her since he worked directly under Kinzo. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her gratitude, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor with Cannon. But as Natsuhi watched them go, the words directed at her from behind were sneering.
Well then, you must bring father with you, okay? After all, it's his son's precious wife who's asking. I'm sure he'll listen to you. We're guests, so we'll just relax here at our leisure.
Wait a minute, you're taking this too far. Sorry, Natsuhi-san, but we're counting on you to deal with father. Without answering, Natsuhi forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place.
Ava is a what now? I know you redacted it for good reason. Let's just say I think there's like some canine in her blood. After all that excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up early. George, Aniki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the bed in the cousin's room, but Maria, who'd gone straight to bed without joining in, was completely awake. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, she was met with the loud snoring of the other three cousins. For a while, Maria had to think about what happened. Oh, wait, back that up. Okay, so it is Battler's perspective. All right. After that, she realized that her mother wasn't with her, and she quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousin's room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother.
Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she slammed the door shut. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over in his sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him up. After a while, Maria returned, once again opening the door with a lively bang.
Ooh.
When she had left the room, her face had been sleepy, but now that she was back, she looked irritated. After that, she climbed up on Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trampoline.
Ooh, ooh, ooh! Wake up! Ooh, ooh, ooh!
It's an enemy raid! Surround them! After making sure I was awake, Maria moved over to George Aniki's bed and started jumping on that too. In that manner, the three of us were all greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening. Thanks for waking us up, Maria-chan. You stopped us from sleeping in after that late night. If only you could have been a bit more gentle about it. George Nissan, you really are an adult. I respect that. It'll be 7 soon. Well, it's not really a bad time to wake up.
Ooh! Mama's not here! Ooh, ooh, ooh!
And Rosa, she wasn't in her room. I wonder if she's already woken up and gone to the mansion.
Not here! Ooh, ooh! Ooh! Mama! Ooh, ooh, ooh!
All right, Freddie Mercury, calm down. Maria kept groaning ooh, ooh, and looking unhappy. She didn't exactly seem lonely because her mother wasn't around. It was more like she was irritated and thrown off balance because her mother wasn't where she'd expected. If we could just tell her where her mother was, that alone would probably calm her down. But unfortunately, we had no way of knowing where Aunt Rosa was except that she wasn't here.
Anyway, it's time for breakfast, so let's head over to the mansion.
That's right. Maria, let's go to the mansion together, okay? I'm sure Aunt Rosa will be there too.
Ooh? Mama's in the mansion? Then I'll go there. Ooh.
Yeah, I guess we should go to the mansion. Our parents have probably already gone there. Maria regained her usual composure so completely her earlier tantrum now seemed like a lie. We got dressed, left the room, and head for the mansion. Okay, because I was a little worried that they were sleeping in their clothes for a minute. Why do you feel like the missing people went the way of Maria's rose? That's a good question.
Once more, there was a knocking sound on the study door, but there was no answer.
He seemed to be sleeping well, and I could not wake him.
If she went back downstairs and said something like that, Ava would probably be amused and triumphant. And even putting Ava aside, it was problematic that Kenzo had stayed shut away during this entire once-a-year conference, not even coming down to greet anyone. Even the family head, no, especially the family head, couldn't fail to make an appearance.
I wonder if I can convince him myself.
Natsuhi readied herself and used the key that she'd borrowed from Genji to open the door.
Excuse me.
Even though she was prepared for the sweet stench, which seemed to eat into one's brain as it poured out the small crack in the door, she couldn't help but grimace. Thinking that he might still be sleeping, Natsuhi entered the room quietly. When she did, Kinzo was already awake and looking down out of the window.
So you're awake. Good morning.
How did you get in? Kenzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh, but calm, and Natsuhi was slightly reassured. However, though he was awake, he wouldn't have ignored all that knocking if he was in a good mood. Natsuhi wasn't able to relax.
My sincere apologies. I asked Genji-san and he allowed me to borrow the key to the study.
Oh?
Yeah, get out of there.
Genji did. If my friend thought it was that important, then I have no choice but to listen. So, what business do you have with me?
Well, breakfast will be ready soon, and I would greatly appreciate it if you would join us.
I will eat here. Have it brought here like always.
But, Father, this family conference happens only once a year. Please, at least let them see your face.
Go back downstairs. Are you asking me to join in as they discussed how to chew up my inheritance after I die? How foolish. Let them speak of such matters as much as they please without me. And if that's what you call a family conference, it's hardly worth leaving my room for it. I am busy. Do not bother me. His last words carried the threat that any further questions would not be appreciated. Natsuhi realized that adding any further pleas would finally bring his wrath down upon her. She didn't look forward to facing Eva's sarcasm, but there was nothing more Natsuhi could do.
Is that so? Understood. I'm sure everyone will be sorry to hear it, but I will tell them.
Natsuhi decided to give up. Bowing silently, she tried to leave the room before Kinzo's spasmodic temper could flare up. As she did, Kinzo spoke to her. His voice was so calm and gentle, it felt like it came from an entirely different person. Natsuhi, it has been quite some time since you married into the Ushiromiya family.
Yes. It has been many years since I was first permitted to bear the name Ushiromiya.
Do you sometimes long for your previous family?
No. Marriage means abandoning your birth family. I am Ushiromiya Natsuhi. The Ushiromiya family is the only family I can come home to. The only one I'm fond of.
She truly wasn't exaggerating. Such was the resolve she felt whenever she applied the Ushiromiya family name to herself. And that's precisely why she was so saddened when her husband didn't treat her like an Ushiromiya, leaving her to race about in vain. If Kraus were a woman, and you his husband... No, I won't say that.
Oh, what do you mean by that? Father?
Natsuhi was shocked. If Kinzo's words just now were what they seemed, it would have been more than enough to make up for all she'd suffered up to that point. Forget it. It's just the nonsense of an old man. Kinzo again once again faced away from her. He told her to forget it, but Natsuhi couldn't help feeling a warmth in her heart.
Father, even though I, Natsuhi, am not connected to you by blood, I am still your daughter. I will most assuredly see to it that your honor and glory and everything you have left behind are protected.
You do not have the right to wear the one-winged eagle. However, the one-winged eagle is surely engraved in your heart. That is irrefutable proof that you are my blood relative, one who will inherit the glory of the Ushiromiya family. Some will sneer that there is no eagle on your clothes, but such words are not worth lending an ear to. Only those who hold the eagle in their hearts are my true blood relatives. I now consider it an honor that you were welcomed into the Ushiromiya family. Without saying anything more, Kinzo remained with his back to Natsuhi. However, Natsuhi couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside her that she hadn't felt since long ago, when she had been just a child. Natsuhi bowed silently to his back and left the room.
Ah, good timing. How is father? You were taking so long, I came to check.
When Natsuhi left the study, she saw Ava climbing the stairs, and their eyes met. Ava was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsuhi would leave grudgingly after failing to convince Kinzo. However, the way Natsuhi was now, such a frivolous laugh would not disturb her. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it in her heart. So she spoke calmly, clearly, and confidently, with the dignity of one who would protect the Ushiromiya family's glory.
Father said he would not join in on the family conference. He says he has no interest in discussing such obscene matters. I figured you'd say something like that. If you fail to persuade father, just say so. How pitiful. I'm beginning to see why father lamented so. What do you mean by that?
Natsuhi did not answer. Just as Kinzo had done earlier, she showed Ava her back as she headed down the stairs. Ava finally realized that she was being made fun of, that something had happened to quickly bolster Natsuhi's confidence. Even so, she apparently didn't have the courage to risk Kinzo's wrath. Unable to even knock at the door, she could only click her tongue, make a motion as though scratching at it, and follow after Natsuhi. Now that's a funny mental image, I'm not gonna lie.
So, were Nissan and the rest there? Did you ask father about them? I didn't get the chance to ask, but they were not inside the study. Father would never let them into his room to discuss such a lowly topic, so it is unlikely he knows where they went. Let us go downstairs and wait for the servants to return from their search. Breakfast may be late, but how would you like some tea, Ava-san? That would be fine.
Ava couldn't hide her confusion at the complete difference in Natsuhi's attitude. She was acting so boldly, and while Ava hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about her. Unable to find fault with anything, Ava could only follow Natsuhi back to the parlor. When the two of them returned to the parlor, Hideyoshi had been joined by the 4 children and Nanjo. Genji, who had been talking with Hideyoshi, reported the current situation when he noticed that Natsuhi had returned.
You still have not found my husband and the rest?
Yes, my apologies. Also, Kumasawa has started preparing breakfast. She said that she will need just a little longer.
The clock read a little past 8. 8 should have been the time to start breakfast. Normally, going over that time limit would be a disgrace to the host.
Karen is now searching outside. Also, no one has seen Shannon either.
Even Shannon's missing. Truly, just how many people did my husband bring with him on his little walk?
Just how many people had gone missing by now? Now that the number was this large, it was starting to feel truly unpleasant, as though the people here were the only ones being left out of something interesting. At least, that seemed to reflect the feelings of the children, and Maria in particular. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go off and eat something delicious without her. The other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria and cheer her up again. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing blissfully at the children while reading a book. It must have been a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing towards them with a pitter-patter. There was only one set, so they realized before seeing who it belonged to that it was probably Canon, not Kraus and the rest.
Madam, excuse me. Judging by your appearance, you still haven't been able to find them. My apologies. I still haven't. That will be enough. You've worked hard.
She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on this island. They hadn't a thing to eat since the previous night, so their stomachs must be growling about now. They'd probably come plodding back of their own accord before long. By now, Natsuhi was thoroughly exasperated and started to feel that there was no reason for them to go out of their way and search.
I will go to the kitchen to prepare for some tea for all of the guests. Thanks to both of you for all of your hard work so early in the morning.
Natsuhi left the parlor, acting as though the release in tension had caused a new surge in her headache. Canon tried to call to her back, but Natsuhi left swiftly.
What is it? Was there something else?
Yes. I was unable to find her husband or anyone else, but... Well...
Canon sounded evasive. It looked as though he didn't know where they were, but had spotted something that might be connected to their disappearance. Ava and Hideyoshi noticed this exchange of words and came over. They'd probably picked up on something strange in Canon's behavior. What's going on, Canon-kun? You found Kraus Nissan and everyone else?
Actually, the Rose Garden storehouse looks strange.
What do you mean? It looks strange.
It was, how should I explain it?
Canon hesitated once more. His tone wasn't at all what you'd expect from this usually fearless boy. Seeing this, Ava and Hideyoshi looked at each other dubiously.
What do you mean? Are you saying Nissan and the others were inside the storehouse? No, I'm going to inspect the inside now. I just now came back to get the key, but,
I don't really get it, but it sounds like we just gotta look around inside it. Where's the key to that storehouse?
It's in the servant's room. Let us check inside the storehouse at once.
Canon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor, saying that he would go check, but then Ava and Hideyoshi followed after him. What was this something strange about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Canon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside, but perhaps their curiosity over this something that Canon couldn't talk about won out. While the children made a big fuss watching television, Canon and the rest dashed over to the entrance. The Rose Garden storehouse was a place that housed various tools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it had been built so that it was hidden in a corner of the Rose Garden. Canon, Genji, Ava, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the Rose Garden holding umbrellas. They entered a small path just off the Rose Garden, which was normally off limits for those appreciating the garden and only used by those maintaining it. As they dashed down that, the storehouse came into the view in front of them. It was quite an old shed, and compared to the flawlessly perfect beauty of the Rose Garden, it was pretty seedy looking. It was easy to understand why it had been built in a hard-to-see place. Ava and Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long after Canon and Genji. You two sure are fast. I thought my heart was gonna explode.
I never knew they had a storehouse way over here. But what is that?
When Ava looked at where Canon was pointing, she was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Canon's finger and was likewise too shocked to speak. The entrance to the storehouse was a kind of shutter, and there, everyone suddenly realized why Canon had been unable to find words to describe what they now saw. On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to wind and rain for so long, stuck right on it. There was something that looked like a strange dark red liquid, mucus, or maybe it was some sticky paint. An indescribably eerie shape was drawn on the shutter with some kind of ghastly substance. The rain had caused it to drip down like fresh blood leaking from an open wound. No more beating around the bush. Some kind of mark was drawn there, with a ghastly substance that looked like blood, in a shape that seemed to suggest something ominous. 2 circles were drawn there, and inside them was a design that looked like a cross. The 4 ends of the cross were widely exaggerated, and it looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. And in the cracks between these shapes, written closely packed together, were some unfamiliar characters or possibly symbols.
What a vulgar bit of graffiti! Could this be one of those magic circles used in demonic ceremonies?
It wasn't surprising that Hideyoshi would say that about such a ghastly shape drawn with a deep red dripping substance.
When was this made? Last night I came here before it started raining, and there was nothing drawn here at the time.
We must do something before anyone else sees this. If they laid eyes upon it, it would cause them great discomfort.
That's right. Even though it's just a shed, I wouldn't want to leave such an unpleasant piece of graffiti alone for even a second longer than I had to.
There is some paint inside the storehouse. Let us paint over it temporarily as an emergency measure. Then repaint it again someday when the weather is good.
Genji remembered that he had just recently seen another scribble and that it too had been made with a strange dark red substance over the same color, of the same color as this. That must have been. That's right. He had seen it on the door to Natsuhi's room.
Canon-kun, let's remove the squiggle quickly and go back, okay? Even though it's just a storehouse, it's really irritating to have graffiti around the home I was brought up in. Yes, ma'am. I'll take care of it immediately.
Cannon squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all of his strength. A boisterous noise resounded, and the eerie shape drawn on the shutter began to get sucked in through the top as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, that ominous drawing disappeared from their direct gaze, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to a kids program they came across, Maria was feeling much better. Battler and Jessica were poking fun at the kids show at every turn, cackling together. George was enjoying the program with Maria from her perspective. Nanjo sat on a sofa by himself, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. They were the footsteps of a single person. Did that mean it wasn't the group of 4 that had just left? It was Genji. It was very rare for Genji, who considered being out of breath a violation of a servant's virtues, to be gasping for air. He had probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet, and he didn't have his usual trim appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small, silent bow and quickly approached him.
Dr. Nanjo, my apologies. Please come with me quickly. Oh, what is the matter?
As Genji whispered something into Nanjo's ear, Nanjo went pale. He rose from the sofa, trying not to be noticed by the children who were still engrossed by the TV, and the 2 of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. Just as they were about to exit the parlor, they came across Natsuhi, who was pushing a serving cart loaded with the tea set. Genji whispered something into Natsuhi's ear, and Natsuhi went pale too in apparent shock. Then, leaving the serving cart where it was, the 3 of them dashed towards the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window.
What's that? Is that Genji-san and Dr. Nanjo and that's Natsuhi, isn't it? What's up, Aniki? Maybe something happened. They look terribly flustered.
When Jessica and Maria saw that Ava, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo were no longer in their seats and that the serving cart had been abandoned in the entrance to the parlor, they also realized that something was the matter.
Could there have been some kind of accident? Let's go check it out. It's no fun if we're the only ones left out, right?
For some reason, what Battler said sounded extremely indiscreet, but they couldn't deny that they were a little insecure and convinced and concerned after seeing the adults run off into the rain without regard to their appearance.
Let's check it out, okay? I'm worried something might have happened.
Jessica's uneasy words spoke for all of them. Hey, Maria, are you coming too? Or will you watch TV?
Ooh, wanna watch TV? Ooh.
Let's go on without her. Maria-chan will be back soon. You keep watching TV, okay?
Ooh.
By the time the kids made it outside, the adults were no longer in sight. But Jessica seemed to have a pretty good idea where they'd gone, judging by the direction they'd been running. Following Jessica,
We ran through the rain-soaked garden. The wind seemed to suddenly get stronger.
the malicious sound of thunder began to ring out like it had the previous night. It felt like an eerie something had surrounded the island and was trying to stop us from moving forward. Jessica, is there something over this way?
I'm pretty sure there's a storehouse for gardening tools or something. What in the world could be going on in a place like that?
Just as Jessica had said, they began to see a storehouse in front of them. They could also see the adults there. The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several adults looked as though they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsuhi was outside the storehouse. Without even holding an umbrella, she looked like she was hanging her head, and her back was facing them. There was Genji, Nanzo, and Natsuhi, who had just left the mansion. The ones who'd left earlier, Ken, Ava, and Hideyoshi, were also there, making for a small crowd of people, but there was absolutely no bustle of activity. When Natsuhi realized that the children were approaching, a terrible expression rose to her face, and she ran at them with her arms spread wide.
You mustn't come any closer! Go back to the mansion!
However, no. Because of that, the kids saw the scene Natsuhi was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse, with its shutter wide open, a faint fluorescent light shone down. And right there was... Jessica's piercing shriek rang out. But that was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same thing spilled out of Battler and George's mouths as well. Ava spread her arms just like Natsuhi, roaring at the kids with a bone-chilling expression on her face.
George, take everyone and return to the mansion! Quickly! Right now!
When Natsuhi spread her arms, I thought she was trying to prevent us from advancing any further. But that wasn't why Ava was spreading her arms right now. She was trying to stop us kids from seeing that terrible scene. It was her mother's heart trying to protect the eyes and hearts of us children by blocking our view of that terrible scene by at least the width of one of her arms.
Is this some kind of joke? Is it? I'd seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. In manga, TV, anime, and movies, I'd seen it over and over again. This was just seeing something appear in real life that I'd seen plenty of times before in some of those more sensational movies, right? That alone shouldn't... That suit... It's an old bastard's, isn't it? I get it then. That's Uncle Kraus. And Kyrie's son and Aunt Rosa... Ah! Dad! You mustn't, Jessica! You mustn't go in! You mustn't look! Dad! Ah!
Rigor mortis has set in almost across the entire body. Most likely 6 hours or more have passed since death. As far as I can tell by looking at the damaged area, there's a high probability they were damaged after their deaths. No, I must watch what I say. I'm a general practitioner. Examining corpses is outside my area of expertise.
So what does that mean? Just killing them wasn't enough, so they went on to do something like this? The devil! This here's the work of the devil!
And Natsuhi, Jessica in her arms, and Aunt Ava caught George Haneke. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. If only there'd been someone to catch me there, too. I wouldn't have needed to have this horrible, evil scene burned into my eyes. No, that's not it. It isn't that there's no one here to catch me. The people who should catch me. They're right there, aren't they? Just as Jessica said, it did look like a storehouse for gardening tools. A lawnmower with extra blades, a grass sickle, and a hammer. Some carpentry tools, such as a saw. Piled up potted plants and bags of fertilizer. And treated just the same. The corpses of several people had been laid to rest there. No, had been tossed in there. I could tell them by their clothes. An old bastard and Kyrie-san. Uncle Kraus and Aunt Rosa. Beyond that, Goda-san and... Are there still more of them? How many people died? You're fucking kidding me! I can't even count them on one hand! Damn it! I didn't know whether it had been one of these gardening tools, which if used for something other than their intended purpose could definitely be wielded with such a naked brutality, or whether some horrible tool had been brought in here specifically for this. Anyway, each one of the bodies jammed in here had been given an atrocious makeup. It wasn't makeup. It was more like their faces have been plowed. Their faces were... what song is this that's playing now? And thank you, Miranda, for joining. How's your day going? Golden Slaughterer is the name of this song. Their faces were smashed, forced into expressions that normal people couldn't even make after death. I couldn't tell where the eyes or the noses were, but I could find their mouths because they were gaping wide, their gums exposed. But their front teeth were missing, and even the cheeks that should have covered up all this were torn up and laid bare. That trendy makeup you always spent so much time on, even though you're a man, isn't doing a thing now. Dad! I always thought you were going to hell, but still not like this, right? You were such a son of a bitch that you should have had to suffer so brutally. Kyrie-san, didn't I tell you to stop going out with this guy? There's absolutely no reason for you to end up like this, too. I've got no faces. No faces. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it!
Battle-son, you mustn't look anymore. There's no way your mother and father would want you to see them like this. For your mother and your father's sakes, you mustn't look anymore.
Dead people are supposed to have faces that look like they're sleeping peacefully, right?
They've got no faces. My dad and Kyrie-san have no faces. I don't even know what kind of faces they were wearing when they died. What's wrong with me?
I have to see these smashed monster-like faces every time I remember them. That's just great. I didn't want to remember that old bastard's smug-gate face anyway. Just great. Just great. But why even Kyrie-san's face? Kyrie-san wasn't a crook. Sure, she took me off a bit now and then, but she was like a cool big sister to me. This is wrong. This is all wrong. At least Uncle Kraus had it better, doesn't he? It's not his whole face, just the side. At least he's got half his face left, right? That's still better. That's still better. I'm letting say you handle that one. Jessica filled her ears with the sound of her own screaming, trying to shut out my reckless words. Stop it, Battler-kun. Just stop it. Just stop it. Aniki! Aniki! Ah! Disregarding age and appearance, I fell to my knees, clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone there. Representing the feeling of everyone there, I screamed over and over. Father. The ones lying over there, Uncle Kraus, Uncle Rudolph, Aunt Kyrie, and Aunt Rosa and Goda-san. Just those 5, right? No. 6. There's one more person over here. The body Hideyoshi was looking down on now happened to be hidden among the shadows that mountain range of objects in a blind spot to George, who stood by the entrance.
so George couldn't tell whose body it was. So George cursed himself. He cursed the fact that his worst guesses always turned out to be right.
So, the one lying at your feet is Shannon, isn't it?
Yes, it's Shannon-chan. George fell completely silent. He shook slightly, his lower lip trembling. Normally, he would have wanted to run to his beloved's body, screaming and crying. However, before rashly rushing forward, he worked to keep his composure and asked his father,
Is Shannon the same as Uncle Kraus and the others?
Hideyoshi deeply understood the meaning of those words, so he couldn't give George an immediate answer. Or rather, he felt that silence was the only sincere and loving response he could give George right now. When George asked if Shannon was the same, he meant to ask whether her corpse was in the same condition as the others or not. Since Hideyoshi hadn't denied it, it meant her corpse was in the same brutal state.
Can I look at Shannon?
No, you can't.
Why not? After all, I won't be able to see Shannon's face again, right? So why won't you let me see what her face looked like at the end?
The last time you saw Shannon-chan was yesterday, right?
Yes.
I see. When you left her, what kind of face was she showing you?
It was a wonderful smile.
After he handed her the ring, she hesitated, even though she must have already made up her mind. Then she looked bashful and ran away because she was embarrassed to let him see her face looking like that. That's the expression that was revived in George's mind. I see. And I'm sure... Oh, wrong button. And I'm sure Shannon-chan would want to leave you with that smile in your memory. Hideyoshi looked down upon Shannon's body lying at his feet. Just like the other bodies, it was in such a horrible state that it'd make anyone want to cover their eyes. Her head had been smashed in from the side, and no more than half of her expression remained. If the remaining blood-soaked half of her expression had been wiped clean, would that graceful smile of hers have peeked out? But only half of it. Without thinking, Hideyoshi slapped his hands over his eyes. How brutal. If her face was going to be crushed anyway, then if only all of it had been crushed. He might have been able to temporarily distract George from his pain by making the pathetic suggestion that it was someone else wearing Shannon's clothes. But half of her face had been left untouched. It caused the body so much humiliation, while still proving beyond doubt that the body was Shannon's and no one else's. How inhuman. How brutish. And there, trying his best to burn the image of the remaining half of Shannon's expression into his eyes as she lay at Hideyoshi's feet, was Cannon. Cannon was not crying. Tears had risen to his eyes, but they did not drip down. But that didn't mean he wasn't feeling as much sadness as everyone else. Losing Shannon, who had lived with him in the same orphanage, whom he had loved as a sister, must have been just the same as losing a blood relative. George, I'm sure Shannon-chan is saying thank you. She must be glad you didn't end up seeing her such a pitiful state. I'm sure she's thanking you for holding strong and showing restraint.
I understand. I understand, Father. I understand.
George leaned against the outside wall of the storehouse, crouching down limply.
Father, I have a request.
What is it?
I want you to look for me. Is there a ring on Shannon's finger?
A ring? Let me see. Hideyoshi crouched down. As he did, Cannon silently pointed to one of Shannon's hands. Yeah, there is. It's a diamond ring. With a valuable diamond. Must have been pretty expensive.
And which hand and which finger is it on?
The ring finger of her left hand. I see. So Shannon-chan was engaged?
George, don't tell me you...
Oh, yeah. Part 5 of episode 1. Sorry about that. But thanks for joining, not just the same. Yeah, episode 5 is way different.
Ava, that doesn't matter now. Man made a lifelong promise to Shannon-chan. Man promised her happiness for life. Who that man was isn't the issue here. Being told that by a man is a woman's dream, isn't it? I don't know when she received this ring. I also don't know who gave it to her. However, even so, Shannon-chan took this ring. Then she accepted it and put it on her left ring finger. I'm sure the man who gave it to her was also happy. To most of the people there, Hideyoshi was simply disturbed by this extraordinary situation and was blurting out strange things. However, someone who knew of George and Shannon's true relationship would understand the full meaning of those words.
I see. Thank you, Father.
George stood up. The traces of tears still streaked his face, but his expression had returned to its usual calm one.
Let's go. Battler-kun, Jessica-chan. If we stay here any longer, we'll get in the way of the adults. You're right.
Jessica sniffled once, showing her face to her mother, who had been holding her the whole time to let her know that she was okay now. When she faced George again, she once again had on her usual expression. Although she still couldn't smile.
Battler, hang in there.
Battler kept on crouching in front of his parents' bodies.
I'm sorry. Crying like hell calmed me down. You bastard. Dad, I bet you're laughing at me. After all that shit I talked about you, here I am crying like a baby just because you died. So what? I guess got the gene that makes you cry when your parents kick the bucket.
Battler's face was still bright red from the tears, but he had at least recovered enough to fake a smile, if only a bitter one.
Cannon, you mustn't remain here any longer either. Take the children and return to the mansion.
Natsuhi had been standing under the rain this whole time, unable to take a step into the storehouse. Maybe she had her own way of grieving, different from Battler's. Realizing that she had to take on a role of responsibility now that her husband was dead, she gave Cannon those orders. Well, I'm assuming that it's just... given his dad's relationship with him, the fact that he's crying is just kind of a shock, and so... I'm sure his dad would mock him for it if he were still alive.
Madam. Cannon rose silently and turned to face me. His face was pure white, almost as though his own heart had died along with Shannon. There was no life in his expression. On an ordinary day, if he'd been told to guide the children through the beautiful rose garden, Cannon might have led the way. But now there was no distinction between Cannon and the children. They were now just kids of about the same age, suffering the pain of losing those close to him. After making sure that the children were leaving, Natsuhi started giving orders to Genji. Genji, contact the police immediately. They probably won't be able to come until the typhoon passes, but they should be able to tell us what to do next.
Understood. There's an emergency radio, so I will use that to contact them.
When she heard that, Natsuhi remembered. That's right, the phones were out today, weren't they? However, they also had a radio since they couldn't necessarily rely on phones all the time while living on an isolated island. At any rate, they should start by contacting the police and receiving their instructions. Everything else could wait.
Dr. Nanjo, is there anything more you can do here?
Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do.
Understood. Genji, could you at least cover their faces with something? Exposing them like this is humiliating to them as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Genji picked up several dried-up towels from the inside the storehouse, when Ava stopped him with a shrill voice.
Wait a second! Stop! This is the scene of the crime, isn't it? That we mustn't disturb it. We all panicked and walked in here with our shoes on, but even that will surely get in the way of the police investigation, right?
Natsuhi glared at Ava, offended. Objectively speaking, Ava was right. Even so, she glared at Ava as though accusing her of refusing to do those tragic corpses, which had been humiliated even after death, the simple kindness of covering their faces. However, Ava had spoken both calmly and correctly. This horrible situation definitely wasn't an accident. It was a crime. Someone had killed them. It was a murder case. So, they needed to be careful to avoid disturbing the site any further.
I agree with Ava-san. Until the police come, we should leave everything be. What do you say, madam?
You're right. Very well. Close it up. And just in case, we should put a different lock on it.
A different lock?
Yes. When we came here, the shutter was locked. That means the culprit used the key to the shutter to lock it.
That makes sense. So, does that mean the key that opens this shutter will have the culprit's fingerprints on it?
I'm sure it'll be worth submitting to the police as evidence. But Canon-kun usually has it, and he used it to unlock the shed just now. It'll probably have Canon's fingerprints on it. Also, that key was handed to Genji-san just now, and he took it with his bare hands. It doesn't look like it'll be very useful as evidence.
That was careless of me. My apologies.
Genji-san, are there any other keys to this storehouse?
No. Only this one.
So the culprit walked out of the servant room with that key, and then was nice enough to return to the key to where he found it? Hideyoshi's theory sounded plausible, but was actually very strange if you thought about it. Why would they go to all the trouble of returning a key they stole? No, if you think about it even more deeply, there are some points that are even more bizarre. When a criminal hides a body, they're usually trying to delay the point at which it'll be found so they can use that time to escape. The six weren't necessarily killed here, but it was reasonable to assume that they were killed somewhere on this island, carried to the storehouse, and hidden to delay this discovery of the crime. And yet the eerie magic circle scribbled on the storehouse shutter had eloquently indicated the location of the hidden corpses. Sure, it didn't explicitly mention the corpses, but 6 people had gone missing. In that situation, someone had made such an obvious piece of graffiti and even returned the key to the shutter, almost as though they wanted the corpses here to be discovered.
Anyway, we can't put all our faith in a lock that the culprit has opened once before. If we want to protect this place from the culprit's hand, I think we should put a new lock on it.
I think that is a good plan. I agree.
Genji fished around inside the storehouse and unsealed a brand new padlock that had been inside a small box.
What should I do with this key?
I will take it. I will take responsibility and hand it over to the police.
Natsuhi took the key to the padlock from Genji's hand. After that, they all exited and lowered the shutter. And so, the corpses were once again sealed behind that shutter, which was still covered with that creepy magic circle. Genji crouched down in front of the shutter to fasten the new padlock. Shutters often have a place in front where you can attach your own lock, in addition to the main lock of the shutter. This was one of those types. In the midst of the roar of the thunder and the pouring rain, the storehouse stood there, ominously. With its closed shutters still covered in a blood-like, creepy substance, it swallowed up the bodies of the 6. To Natsuhi, putting the new lock on wasn't mainly to preserve the scene for the police. She might have felt like she wanted to shut that mouth for all eternity, to prevent that eerie beast from swallowing up any more victims.
Come on, let's go, everyone. Dr. Nanjo, thank you very much for your work. Genji, hurry and contact the police.
I will do so as soon as I return. The adults left the storehouse. The ghastly magic circle drawn on the shutter kept the 6 bodies in its throat, looming eerily as the lightning occasionally lit it up. And my friends, that is the signal that we will resume this tale next Wednesday. Let me go ahead and save real quick. Always want to keep a backup, just in case. All right, so... Objection. I'm afraid I overrule you on this one, because it was short. That one was a bit longer than most of my other streams. This one lasted for like 2 hours and 45 minutes, but... Yeah, no, I start at 8 o'clock Central Time, and I usually go about 2 chapters worth. So far, they've been about 2 hours long. So if you'd like to catch the rest, you can go to my... if you'd like to catch the earlier installments, you can go to my YouTube channel, which I've linked in the chat. Also, if you would like or follow this page, this will be... make sure you turn that little notification bell on. That'll be how you know what time I'll be starting the next stream. Should be 8 p.m. next Wednesday, but, keep an eye on it in case something comes up and I'm unable to do this at the same time. Let me check something here. Okay. We'll go ahead and raid his little kitty, since she's streaming Kingdom Hearts 2 right now. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Hope to see you on Sunday when I return to streaming Death Stranding, and Wednesday when I return to streaming this. This is Dr. Novelle, the Endless Sorcerer, signing off for the evening. You guys have a good one.